I played the first 5 hours of the Silent Hill 2 remake and was pleasantly, if not cautiously, surprised. It's clear that the Silent Hill 2 remake proudly holds tight to what the production teams identified as its core tenets, from its tension and atmosphere to the belter of a reworked soundtrack. But the time I spent with the game would also go on to unveil a curious sense of hesitancy, constantly pulling it back from being either a totally faithful remake or a brave reimagining entirely. There were plenty of bright spots throughout my hands-on experience, including the game's dynamic third-person movement, refined combat, and expanded exploration zones. So much so that, even with my concerns at this point in its development, I'm hopeful that Silent Hill 2 Remake may yet make a lasting impression upon modern-day survival horror audiences, even if the creative teams sound apologetic for its very existence at times. Before I started playing, producer Motoi Okamoto walked us through the game's 9 key new features. There's a thick and realistic blanket of fog enveloping Silent Hill thanks to the game's 4K graphics, including faithful recreations of key locations, down to minuscule items, and facial mocap to make the cutscenes as emotional as possible. On the technical side, he also mentions 3D sound design to heighten immersion, an over-the-shoulder third-person camera perspective, reworked combat featuring a dodge mechanic and aiming reticle, remapping of existing enemies, new and expanded areas and puzzles, and the inclusion of all the original endings. There will even be some brand new Silent Hill 2 endings that can, in the words of developer Bloober Team, only be accessed in New Game Plus, though the studio shies away from revealing more. The game picks up at exactly the same place as the 2001 original, with protagonist James Sunderland arriving at the small deserted town after receiving a mysterious summons from his supposedly deceased wife. It's charged with as much creeping dread as ever. Creative director Mateusz Leinart explained that the team discussed making the iconic introduction more action-heavy, but admitted it did not feel like it was very Silent Hill, and this is why we made the choice to keep it as it was and only pick up the pace after some time. But after taking my first few steps into the mist, I found myself needing to swap over to performance mode in order to achieve a smooth 60 frames per second. It's a little troubling so close to release, especially with quality mode not seeming to boost fidelity much at all, though it's possible this is an older build of the game. But even instances of texture dropout while staring into the recesses of Westvale's many overfilled dumpsters wasn't enough to ruin my day. That's because the opening scenes excel at nailing the atmosphere of Silent Hill as a location, turning it into an expansive, malevolent entity in itself. It might be more modern than fixed camera angles, but the third-person perspective does nothing to distract from how disorienting it feels not to be able to see more than a foot in front of you. Likewise, don't bother to memorise any of the puzzles and key item locations from the original game. You'll find many of them have been remapped entirely in the remake. Feeling so lost in a world I thought I knew pretty damn well is an appropriately jarring sensation, demonstrating Bloober's understanding of how to create uncanny familiarity that keeps you on your toes. It's something that instantly drew me into Capcom's Resident Evil 2 remake back in 2019, and I'm relieved to see flashes of brave mechanical innovation in Silent Hill 2 remake as well. The addition of a single new puzzle while I was exploring Westvale, involving a broken record, is an example of this, proving formative in altering my path through the town as I was led on a wayward treasure hunt. Repairing the record and listening to the music triggered a memory. And where did it lead me? The next main area, Woodside Apartments. I found it a simple yet effective change to how James made his way there in the original, but purists may find the tweak too extreme. Hardwood plank in hand, I took on the iconic lying figure enemies with relentless aggression. I know I didn't need to kill them all, and in some Silent Hill games you'd be wise not to, but the satisfying thwack of wood against the meaty carcass is worth every moment of overkill. The precision element is certainly refreshing in Silent Hill 2 Remake, trading the unwieldy clunk of the original's fixed camera angles for a more targeted approach that allowed me to off far more monsters than I would playing the original. The more I played, the more the puzzles and combat stood out to me as the biggest mechanical strengths of Silent Hill 2 Remake, even if creative director Masahiro Ito insists that the game is not heavily oriented toward combat. The former is something Leynar is especially proud of himself. I think we have been able to capture this smooth balance between the memory of the original game and new content that can, I think, surprise the longtime fans of the series, he says of the puzzle and level design reworks. As a fan of third-person shooters and the way survival horror games have implemented them in recent years, Alan Wake 2, I'm looking at you, I'm not mad about it. It just gives James more ways to fight, and makes me feel more confident in doing so should I be unable to sneak past a foe. But with games like Silent Hill 2, even the smallest of changes are bound to surprise its dedicated fans one way or another. At the very beginning, we didn't want to change anything completely, because we were too afraid of touching the game, lead producer Maciej Głom admits, acknowledging the risks of remaking such a cult classic video game. But after time, we saw that we needed to expand on the game in a way that would be competitive at this generation of consoles. These alterations might not be for everyone, but I found them refreshing. By the time I broke into the Blue Creek apartments, just over 3 hours into the preview session, I noted how well the expanded zones help establish the world of Silent Hill for new and returning players alike. But there was one more surprise in store for me in the form of a nasty new enemy variant, despite Ito-san claiming there were absolutely no brand new monsters in the game. I aimed my flashlight-mounted handgun as I navigated the detritus of the nightmare apartment block. Relief flooded my body to see the coast somewhat clear. It was a brief respite because I soon came face to face with the spider mannequins, or as I like to call them, the bane of my absolute stinking life. I mean that with lots of love. The monsters scurried across the floor, dodging my painstakingly timed shots with unfair levels of grace that James can only dream of in his drab khaki raincoat. Mannequins gave me the biggest jump scares of the day. Every time I entered a room only to have one suddenly move in the corner, I was thrown into a fear-fueled frenzy and battered it to death with my melee weapon, hissing the vilest profanity known to the English language. Even this rage was born of love. For all of Silent Hill 2 Remake's reworks to the form, flow, and style of the original, it more than succeeds at delivering a compulsive survival horror experience. Modern flourishes bring it in line with today's genre standards, falling just shy of making any truly huge moves to break with its core conventions, while showing new sides to a beloved franchise that's finally emerging from dormancy. Having a closer look at what Bloober Team is aiming for on October 8th, I'm more than ready to give Silent Hill 2 Remake the chance it deserves when it comes to PC and PS5. Will you be playing Silent Hill 2 Remake? Are you ready for the new changes? Let us know in the comments and stick with GamesRadar for the latest news, previews and more.